Welcome to Common Sense and Consequences, where we sit down with Montanans from every walk of life to talk honestly about what's happening in our communities, at our capital, and in our daily lives. Welcome. Today we have Dru Koester with us, and we're going to be discussing the different political parties.
Sounds fun.
So thanks for joining us today, Dru.
Oh, you're welcome. Happy to be here.
So tell me about how you got started in politics.
100% Ron Paul in 2012 when he had his presidential campaign. Up until that point, I had grown up Republican and then kind of fallen away from it all. And then he just really inspired me. And so I have been very interested in politics since then. And it wasn't until 2020 that I really got active. I joined the Libertarian Party, kind of hung my hat there. I've followed policy up at the Capitol. It's a passion of mine. I'm sure my relatives hate that it's a passion of mine, but here we are.
I think we all have some of those relatives. I think we are those relatives sometimes.
Yes. It makes any family gathering more spicy. Just, throw one of those things out, it'll be over really fast. So
pretty much. Great. So you hop right into the Libertarian Party.
I did. Yes.
And what drew you to it?
So for me, it's all about the spending. I know that the Democrats and Republicans feel very, very far apart from each other, but when it comes to those spending bills, which money talks, they're spending way too much money. And the Libertarian believes in limited government, limited spending. I am not a socialist. I don't believe in, stealing resources from one person involuntarily and redistributing it to another person. So that's kind of why I was drawn to it, was mostly fiscal policy. I'm pro-peace. And, the Libertarian Party has a lot of different individuals under their umbrella. So I was an independent, and I'm still very independent in my thinking. I don't really feel that if a political party tells me to think a certain way that I'm going to change my mind. I kind of vote how I want based on, it's very Montanan. Montanans vote the person running. We vote candidates, not party, and that's why we've always gone back and forth on where we stand politically. So I have voted for Republicans. I've voted for a few Democrats local level, and then a lot of Libertarians. But I do not always vote for the Libertarian. It depends who is running. So that is where I ended up. I do like the Montana Libertarian Party is a great community. But, that's where I'm at. And if they're doing something I disagree with, I'll say it. But, again, it's fiscal policy. Foreign policy is a big one to me, too. So that's why I am where I am, I guess you could say.
Well, it's interesting to me how I see it's changed over the years, politics in general. The Republican Democrat Party, were established in the mid-1800s. But the Libertarian Party, that was 1970, give or take.
Yep.
So it's pretty new compared to the other two.
Yes.
And I know when my parents were young and even their parents, it was a little bit more party line where you align with my values, I have confidence in you, and you kind of voted party line. Mm-hmm. But I think what a Republican and a Democrat in particular represented then has changed.
It is a wild time we are living in. If we were to go back 20 years and be like, here's what defines what a Democrat is, here's what defines what a Republican is. And I've read even great books from that time period that were about what is what. We're living in a very cattywampus time period, and even within the two big political parties, I feel like there's warring on what direction the party is going to go in.
Right.
So it's almost like we have 4 political parties, but in 2 camps.
Yeah.
So you have the establishment Republicans, and then you have MAGA, which is the new crop coming up. And then with the Democrats, you have kind of the more old school Kennedy.
Yeah.
People. And then you have this radical Antifa kind of energy going on. So, it's hard to picture. I feel like those 2 big parties hold so much power that you got these people who don't really align, and they're trying to be like, I'm going to use this vehicle to get as far as I can go. So we have the socialists versus the Kennedians, And it's just an interesting time. I think when I think about my grandparents, if they voted for Carter, would they still be Democrats today?
Right.
I don't know. But then I've seen people that have just rode that bandwagon all the way. So, and then we have the Bush Republicans, which are still very present. These are the, let's invade Iraq, massive foreign policy,
Right.
Patriot Act, warring against, maybe we shouldn't be in, Afghanistan for the rest of our life, So it's a very interesting time. And then what they've said they stand for. I mean, in COVID, it was just all across the board, besides a few smattering of heroes here and there. All the rules are off the table when this A, B, and C happens. So, yeah.
It's interesting how fragmented it's really clearly become, each with their kind of own set of ideals.
Yes.
And focus.
And we see it at the state capitol, too. The war between the Republican Party up there, who had a majority, but then the complete fracture of they had Republicans, I hate to say leaving the group, but they were clearly sabotaging what a lot of the new coming up Republicans wanted. So there was a huge war within the party. What direction is this party going to go?
Right. And I like how you put that. You have more establishment versus what I would call the more constitutional conservative mindset. And it really, to me, comes down to your ideologies here. What's the core of what you believe in?
Yeah.
And it's hard to find another group that really encompasses everything that you also stand for, right? So we try to come as close as we can, but really, I think there's a disconnect with the people we're voting for and how they're voting versus how we think they're voting, what we think we're voting for. I don't see that there's a level of education happening, and most of us have so many things going on anyway. It's hard to follow, especially something that's so contentious. Like, who wants to follow something so contentious?
It is stressful.
It is
stressful, And I think a lot of us, we're working, we're contributing, we're raising our families. And to have to take the time to police what all these guys are doing at the Capitol, it's just exhausting to have watchdogs constant, because it's just the thousands of bills they push through. I mean, how do you even take the time to read them all? It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it definitely can be. For sure.
I think there's also an aspect of it as the more powerful the office gets, the less quality of people are seeking it. I feel like the best people running for office are servant leaders. They want to serve the people. They want to do what's right, even if it's not popular. Like, they respect the rights of the individual. They respect private property. They respect upholding contracts. But then you get another group of people who enjoys the power and the attention and the accolades. And I think the higher the office gets, the more those types of men are going for that position. And the less you're going to see, like, people that are just, very humble and kind and principled,
Right.
really seeking that out. A lot of times you'll find them in the private sector, but we really need more of them to run for office.
Politics is such a dirty game, though.
It is
I mean,
terrible.
It has been. So, how do we get good people to run to say, okay, I'm going to dip my toes into this really muddy, gross water here, and hope to come out a reasonable human. How it's been has been so terrible. I don't blame people for not wanting to dive into that. Do you think that attitude is across all of the parties, or do you see that happening in more on one party than another?
Do you mean the kind of apathy? Is that what you're talking about?
No, just how you were referencing how a lack of quality, the higher you go in the position.
I think that if you are principled, you, regardless of the side you're on, will face some sort of punishment. I have met Democrats who believe they are helping. They believe what they're saying. RFK Jr. He genuinely wants to do something.
Mm-hmm.
He can't be in his party because of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think Rosendale did a great job. And I think that that war between the parties, I think you will honestly be attacked sometimes by the establishment if you are trying to do a good thing. Thomas Massey, on the national level, we need to primary Massey, we have to get rid of Massey, when all he's saying we're spending too much money, which he's mathematically right.
Right.
So I think the hard thing, regardless of what party you're in, is if you are going to attempt to do this, you're going to have a support system, and you're going to have a huge backbone, because you're going to get the entire force of the big government state on you. I do think that with the Democrats, it's a little hard because they tend to group vote.
Right.
So I think sometimes people, and not so much younger people, because they are not, TV is kind of fading out a little bit, but some people will pop on the news, listen to whatever they're saying for 15 minutes, and think they know what they're talking about.
Right.
So like if I go online and I say, we shouldn't be funding Ukraine, and here's some of the problems that Ukraine has had. I'm not promoting Russia, but I am pointing out problems. I'll get somebody on there that's like, this is propaganda from Russia.
Right.
I don't really know how to argue. It's like, no, but this is actually something that was known before this war even started.
Right.
So this tribalism of we can't ever look at both sides, I see with the Democrats just how free thinkers are getting treated. There's a huge part where it's just offensive to even say, hey, maybe Biden is old and not coherent. And the amount of press time that you're attacked for that. So I'd like to think it was different. This was the party where they were like free speech no matter what it is, when I was in high school. And suddenly we're going on into COVID, and they're like, you can't even ask if this came from a lab, So it's just like, that's hypocrisy. You cannot say we're the party of free speech, but we have to monitor what you say online.
It's so interesting to me, because I think you're absolutely right. There's so much tribalism, and I see, just focusing on the Democrat side here, we'll pick on them for just a minute.
Well, easy
We'll
target.
pick on the other ones later, but just focusing on them. It's very tribal, and I really think they subscribe to an idea, right? This is where we're going. This is a hope. This is a future thing. And I don't see that they get bogged down in as much of the details because they're advancing towards a common goal. It's
You have to crack a few eggs to make an omelet.
kind of, and I would say, maybe even sometimes a little bit dismissive with what's happening in the meantime, because it's still getting them closer to the common goal that they have. And you're right, they do kind of, fall in line with their voting, trusting that those that they have elected into office know exactly what they're doing. Yeah. I think it's just a different mindset.
I agree.
They assume, from what I've seen, they assume that you are the professionals. I don't have to get into this because I'm trusting that you are the professional in this and you know best.
Yeah.
It's a completely different mentality. But even in the Democratic Party, you do see very clear factions here on what you would maybe call the far left. And then again, you're a little bit closer to moderate, or as you would say, maybe Kennedy Democrats. And I wonder, do you see that is really happening as a generational thing, or do you see that mixes just for the Democratic Party?
I thought it would be generational because some of the things that the far left is promoting, all the older people I knew growing up who were Democrats, I would think they would have been offended by it. Mm-hmm. But I am actually seeing the more these ideas are kind of propagandized, I think there's some sort of adherence to the ideas that are being told to them by the news outlets daily, women's reproductive health is under attack, and the trans bills for children are so important. This is critical. There's a trans genocide going on, all this stuff. The sensationalized stories, things I never thought people my grandma's age would be like, this is the most critical issue facing the nation. But unfortunately, when you are sitting in front of a news box that is telling you, we are in a crisis every single day. I hate to say it's radicalized people, but it has worked quite a bit. What you were saying about the ideals is very interesting to me, because I think when we love an idea so much, we can forget, does it actually work?
Right.
So I'm trying to push forward this policy. I love it. It's going to be amazing. And then I scamper away and feel good about myself and don't even see, well, what were the consequences of this? So you get into things like universal health care, universal income. Wow, so beautiful. Mm-hmm. Because nobody is saying, somebody who doesn't believe in these programs doesn't, I guess they could say, you don't have compassion for the poor. It's like, no, I want an economy and a country that helps the poor. Mm-hmm. And these programs, they make you feel good, but they're not good.
Well, if we're focusing on the poor here, when we expect the government to do all of the work, it removes the responsibility from us on a human level, on a personal level, and on a community level. Across the board, this whole last year of, campaigning and talking to people and knocking on doors, one of the things that we talked about quite a lot is the need to build community. Well, there was a time when community was everything.
Yeah.
And we don't have that. What are the factors that remove community? Part of community is you being able to be generous with each other, to know your neighbor, to know when they're struggling, to bring your neighborhood, your church community, your groups together and support each other. If all we have to do is raise taxes and give our money to the government entity because they'll take care of all of that for us, what is left to build community? That is community.
Yep.
We can't export that out and expect to build community.
No.
They're completely, those ideas work completely against each other.
I think there's something kind of diabolical that happens in a society where the government has been taking over all the welfare. I mean, welfare I think we should help people, and I think it should be voluntary. But when you get into the government robbing from people and giving to others, something really perverse starts to happen. And I'm a Christian. I've taken people to churches where I said, this person needs help. And the church normally will say, well, if you get signed up on this program and we'll send you this and we'll help you, we won't even help you fill out this form, but you could get on WIC, you could get on this. And they basically delegate their responsibility over here. And the attitude is, well, I pay taxes, so that's taken care of. But it's such a Scrooge society where aren't there poorhouses and workhouses and prisons? That's not the society I want to live in. I want a society where if you're outraged that there are homeless people and there are poor people, then go do something. Make a ton of money. Ayn Rand said, if you want to help the poor, don't be poor. Go make money and do something good. Don't be like some of these millionaires or billionaires who sit around and say, well, I hope they tax me more so I can help more. It's like, you could help more today.
Right.
So it's hypocritical of you to say, well, I'll write a book on how we need all this stuff for the poor while I own 11 houses like Bernie Sanders does.
Right.
It's just bad form.
Well, I don't think that it has the desired effect down the line that we assume that it does.
No.
Again, are the ideals that I am subscribing to, do they work? And do I believe in them? Do I believe that they will work?
Yeah.
Let's rethink a little bit of that. Let's shift over to maybe the Republican Party on that same line, and we'll pick on the Republicans for a minute. We've got you classified them as MAGA. You're more maybe constitutionalist.
I describe them as a lot of them are younger. They're excited. Mm-hmm. They're like, it's the drain. It's almost like where the Tea Party went, let's drain the swamp, like that stuff. They're enthusiastic. They're excited. They're anti-deep state kind of thing. So that's why I call them that. But I don't know if they're some of them are very loyal to Trump, but I think some of them are going to evolve in politics to even criticize some of the stuff he does, because I think they fell in love with the rhetoric more than the person himself,
Well, and again, I see the right side as being a little bit more driven by facts right in front of my face. What can you show me today?
Yeah.
Right? I want it tangible. I want proof before I'm going to ever be convinced. Right? But at the same time, we've seen the ideology, the hope of what Trump has brought to our nation, all the change. One of the things you mentioned probably before this podcast was that sometimes it's discouraging when we're voting. How do I know that my vote matters, that my vote counts? It's gonna do something good here. It's super discouraging when we see time and time again the policies not change. The things people are running on and trying to change still never seem to go away. So when Trump entered the scene here, there was so much hope. Well, finally, maybe somebody. It was an
amazing first month of his presidency. I was having so much fun. It was, the Doge thing. It was fun. And then all the he pardoned Ross. What's his name? It was the Silk Road kid. I forget his last name, but it was this kid who'd been sentenced to like life in prison. And he shouldn't have been, but he pardoned him, and it was a big deal. So it was a very exciting time. It was a wild ride. Everyone was angry or excited, and legacy media, their hair was on fire. It was
right.
It gave me a little rush.
And it was something new every day to watch.
Yeah.
And you see the numbers go up and all the money we're saving. But there's this hope.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have to have hope.
Maybe it's changing.
Yeah.
But I think we maybe fell into a little bit of that same ideal mindset in that regard as we see the Democrats a lot live in, where I have so much hope in this human. And, in the end, we're all still human. So there's some room there. There's got to be some room there. He obviously isn't the end all be all. But can we do some good things? And is he bringing us forward in meaningful ways that maybe we haven't seen before?
I think Trump's greatest contribution is upending the political landscape. Mm-hmm. He made it so somebody, and I do not think Trump is limited government. I think he is very Democrat in his policy from like 20 years ago, but most of the Republican Party is on that kind of track. But he was not part of the political system, nothing to do with politics, just showed up and was like, well, I'm rich and I'm running. And there were so many young men that were excited about this. Like, finally, not some boring politician that is like, well, we have to do this because,
Right.
And he's also an online troll, which people find hilarious. So he was speaking the language that the rest of us in the middle of the country speak. We don't speak that DC jargon.
Right.
And I think he brought a lot of people into politics who weren't.
Yeah.
I know in particular in the Libertarian Party, there were kids that were enthusiastic in high school about Trump that then veered into Ron Paul and Tom Woods and those guys and got, and started reading books like Atlas Shrugged or The Anatomy of the State or all these, started reading literature about limited government, common law, things that kids normally are not interested in. But Trump opened that door.
Right.
Now, I disagree with him on a lot of policies. However, I'm going to give him his due. He brought people into the liberty movement, not at the same level as Ron Paul, but like anybody who is doing that, I mean, these people are learning and interested, and I think they want somebody to see them. Yeah. Like he just knows how to talk to the common person. The no tax on tips. I mean, I think we need to get rid of the income tax, but, and maybe my entire business is going to be tips from now on, but you get what I'm saying. It's nice to be like, let's do these things. Now, are these things actually going to happen? Or are they great tweets to put out? I don't know. But I think what happened when Trump won the second time, it was all of America saying, we're done with all of this. We are done with the overseas fundings of foreign aid. We are done with these policies that are disrupting this entire framework. Like, we're done of being told we have to be ashamed to be American. Right. We have a great constitution. The founders were very big. They call it natural law, but it was common law. Don't harm another person. Don't infringe on somebody's property. And that was a beautiful way to found a country. Now, the founders weren't perfect, but the idea of America is you're always striving to do better,
Right.
And it's kind of like a North Star was, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence. And they're really, really beautiful documents. I mean, the founding of our country was an amazing thing. And to say we have to throw all that out for socialism, which is not amazing, is disheartening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Trump, even though I don't think he knows all these things, he did speak to something. I think people were waiting for someone to come in and say, DC is a swamp, let's burn it to the ground. And that got him votes. It
Really
spoke to people.
Yeah, speaking to that frustration that we've all been feeling under the surface here.
Every first quarter of the year when I pay my taxes, I am very frustrated.
Right. And speaking to the younger generation, Trump as a well-known businessman, maybe in a little bit different light, not as a politician.
Yeah.
I think to the younger crowd, it was like, oh, well, I don't really know you, but you're kind of cool because you're not a politician. And maybe this is a little cooler than I thought it was. Maybe I will read a book on it. Maybe I'll start asking questions.
And just the podcast rise, the decentralized media has changed the world.
Yeah.
I also think what's also helped is our nation is poorer than we have been in decades. Mm-hmm. My parents' generation was the wealthiest generation the world has ever seen. And it's very unusual for a country to just not keep building up.
Yeah.
And we've gone down. Millennials are straddled with student loan debt, but they also are facing inflation, all these things. Our dollar is shot. And so then you look at Gen Z and Gen Alpha, and you're like, well, are they really going to want to pay 70% of their check so we can have universal health care? They can't afford to move out.
Well, a lot of them are still on your parents' insurance.
They
can't pay for their own yet.
Yeah. So I'm just, this generation, it's going to be harder for them than it was even for mine. But I think that frustration, the dangerous thing, it could lead to you have the red revolution, burn it down. Or it could lead to we want a free market. I want to go cut hair without getting a license. I want to just start my restaurant or my food truck and not get hassled with taxes. I'm done with this. And one thing that's encouraging in Montana is Montana used to pass every single mill levy whenever it came up, no matter what. And now they're starting to reject them in certain counties. The schools are absolutely shocked. We need these mill levies. They say it's you get over 10 grand per kid. I don't know what you're buying, but I can homeschool for under $1,000 a year if I wanted to. Mm-hmm. Come on, you guys are wasting money. Mm-hmm. Trim your fat. I think that rejection is good. We should not be voting for higher taxes. Even if you virtuously believe, then you need to go donate money to the school. But don't force your neighbor to pay for your kid's education.
Well, and that, again, takes it down to that personal level where you have choices. You have choices to pour into community where you want your dollars to go directly.
Exactly. And you will be more discerning than an arbitrary government program. Right. The smallest minority in the world is the individual. Mm-hmm. So if you're not protecting individual rights, then you aren't doing... that's the whole point of a government. Mm-hmm. And I honestly feel that's why the government wants to put everyone in a box. This is women's rights. This is this group's rights. It's no, we're individuals.
Well, and I think it's almost changed to that identity, those identity boxes, and shifted from constitutional. It used to be, this is the Constitution, and where you have individual rights. Mm-hmm. This is about your right to live and to defend your family and your property, and to work as hard as you can, as hard as you want to have the exact life that you want. It was all based on individual rights. Yeah. And instead, that conversation has shifted, and most of that's completely been forgotten. Yeah. We're really living in with two different ideals here. The conversation has shifted dramatically, absolutely.
Well, and I feel like Biden drove me nuts. I could barely listen to him talk, and it wasn't because of how he talked, it was what he was saying. he would say, everybody deserves to have a little bit set aside so that when they retire, and I'm just sitting there, I'm like, I want to have a lot set aside. I don't want your little bit Social Security to live on so I can have like one egg and, you know, barely anything to survive that you're taxing anyway. That's not the American dream. The American dream is just shoot for the stars. Like, I want to make a lot of money. Like, I'm not ashamed to be a capitalist. I want to make money and I want to give generously and I want to do all the things. Your idea of an American dream where we all live on like a pension or Social Security and we can't afford to travel, you know. Yay, you know, he's a millionaire and he's like, you should have a little bit. I'm like,
Well, and I think that's really what that Trump America First idea is about. It's we need to refocus back to the core of what makes this nation great, the core of our values.
Yeah.
And promote from within here. Instead of looking for someone else to have lower costs or to save us in some way, let's focus on who we are so that we can be a rich nation again.
And I think until we stop devaluing the dollar, I don't know how we can get there. Because if we cut spending and just cut spending, that would take us further. But if we just cut taxes, then the tax on the poor and the middle class is transferred to us because our dollar is way in the tank. I look at the price of gold. I was looking at gold at the beginning of 2020 when everyone was panicking and they're like, don't buy gold, it's $2,000 an ounce. And I was like, okay, well, if I had bought gold then, now it's $3,600 an ounce.
Right.
So is gold suddenly magically more valuable, or is it because my dollar is worth way less because of the trillions we're overspending? It's wild how much we are overspending. And they say, well, we need to tax billionaires more. And you could take 100% of their income and it wouldn't last you a year. You're spending too much money.
And it's still theft.
It's still theft.
So it doesn't matter if it comes from a billionaire or not.
I'm not offended that Elon Musk has money.
Yeah.
He doesn't affect my world, you know.
Right.
I'm offended that I'm getting robbed at the beginning of every single year from money I could put aside to my kids' college fund, money I could put aside to own a house someday, money I could honestly give. Like, I believe in generosity. I don't feel like my tax dollars are being well spent. And I know that, and that's one of the reasons I'm a libertarian, and I know whenever you bring up taxes, people are like, well, we'd end up driving on gravel roads. I'm like, that's not where your money's going.
Yeah, right. Well, and I think that this younger generation feels a lot the same way. It's like, wait a minute, why can't I keep my own money? I don't understand why I'm not, you know. There's this disconnect. So, and I think that that's really helped engage more in the conversation, and why a lot of your young people have jumped on, you know, the Trump train.
Oh, and he's got energy.
Yeah,
you know,
he does.
There was nothing energetic about the other side, you know. So I do appreciate that. I loved the first few weeks, and now I'm sad. I would have loved the big, beautiful bill not to be around.
Right.
We've got to cut spending, and the hard thing is they're howling about it, but we have to cut something. There isn't enough money. Rand Paul did a speech where he said the American taxpayer is bringing in enough to pay for Medicaid, or Medicare, Social Security, food stamps, and it might have been Medicaid. There were 4 big juggernaut programs. Anything else we have to go into debt to pay for. We are only bringing in enough to fund those 4, and that's a crisis. Because we're talking about then the military, we're funding that on debt. And, you know, I know you actually need to have some sort of military, you know. everything else, all foreign aid is funded on debt. So this is an absolute crisis, but it's boring to people. So they'd rather talk about, Roe v. Wade has been revoked. So, my daughter's future is in crisis or something like that. Or I don't know whatever hot topic button is, but it's like, I know it's boring, but we really need to talk about budgets.
Right. Yeah. So let's switch over to the Libertarian Party.
Oh boy. It's a wild group.
Tell me more about the party, and do they have the same kind of factions that we see in the Democratic and the Republican side?
Absolutely. Whenever you get a large group of people together, they're going to disagree on things. So I joined the Libertarian Party as part of the Mises Caucus, which was a caucus within the party. And for people who don't follow politics, that is a term for like a group that joins together to try to get power within a political party. It's kind of dumb, but it's what I did. Mm-hmm. And one thing I don't think people realize is that the National Libertarian Party and the Montana Libertarian Party are actually two separate things.
I don't think I knew that.
We send delegates because we are they allow us to be affiliated with them. We will send delegates to vote for things like national party policies and stuff. But in my work with MTLP, they're very independent from the national party, and they're just kind of allowed to run, how according to their bylaws. So I was the vice chair of MTLP. I like to say I was their token female because they needed a female to fill the vice chair role. I think I was done in 2023, and I think I did it maybe a year and a half. And it was a great experience. There are factions within it. One of the most contentious issues between libertarians is the abortion plank. There are a lot of pro-choice libertarians. There's a lot of pro-life libertarians. And it's such an area of dispute that one thing we did was just remove the whole plank from the party platform. We don't have a consensus, so it's not part of our platform. And they did that at the national level too, which was a big deal. I really enjoy it. Sometimes what we have seen in the state of Montana, we have amazing ballot access. The Libertarian Party has had ballot access in Montana for a long, long time. But we don't have right to disaffiliate. So what that means is sometimes people will go register on our ticket as libertarian, and then we find ourselves like, who is this guy? This guy is a socialist. We don't know him. And so we've had primaries where we have our guy, and they're being primaried by somebody we don't know. And it's like, are we even going to have a libertarian on the ballot? Because this person, and the party has made the decision sometimes to not even endorse some candidates. If their beliefs, libertarian has a wide array, but if their beliefs are so far out there where they're like, we need the government to fund e-vehicles for the whole school system, we're like, no, there's nothing, no.
That doesn't work in Montana.
That is full stop, not going to happen. So we're like, put out statements. We don't endorse this person. We don't know who they are. And it's just the way the ballot access laws in Montana are. It's very hard to run in this state. There's been such a concern for dark money coming in that they have made campaign financing laws very difficult to navigate unless you have like lawyers or something. And both parties report on each other. They'll be like, that $12 charge or fund was undocumented, so we need to open investigation. So it's very nerve-wracking. We had one candidate get fined thousands of dollars because he funded his own campaign, but the way the law was written, he was supposed to somehow loan the money to himself first, then fund his campaign. It was very confusing. We had people get in trouble because on their sign, it didn't denote who funded the sign.
That's a common one.
Yeah, it is hard to navigate, even if you're running for school board. And they keep saying if we make it more complicated, it's going to be harder to get outside money. It's actually making it easier because people who are doing these shady things of bringing in outside money into the state, they can afford to pay any fine. They can afford any lawyers to fight it. Whereas like the little plumber who wants to run for school board, he doesn't have those resources or somebody on staff to navigate all of it. But no, yeah. So I was involved on some campaigns for the Libertarian Party, which was a lot of fun. I loved going and watching the debates. And
can you explain a little bit? I don't think that the Libertarian Party is very well known, especially for policy.
Yeah.
We're pretty clear on the differences in the Democrats and Republicans. But for the general public here, can you kind of break it down a little bit where your party stands?
Well, okay, I'm going to be generalizing because I'm sure we'll have some outliers who are going to disagree with me. But I would call myself a Ron Paul libertarian. So we are for basically the government stays out of your business. We don't believe in licensing laws. We don't believe in property tax. We don't believe in income tax. We don't believe in using, we believe socialism is violence. It is robbing and taking. So we don't even believe in like funding. So I would like to see Social Security phased out slowly. Like give people a chance to opt out of it. There's no money in the fund anyway.
Well, it was supposed to be a bank account.
And it's not.
And now it's all been dumped. It's been robbed.
They pillaged it. They pillaged it long ago. So I feel like give young people an option to not pay into this. Let them do their own retirement. Basically, the government shouldn't be trusted. They shouldn't have the right to rob you. We should not be overseas bombing anybody. We should maintain peace, prosperity at home, minimal, if basically no victimless crimes. That is where they stand on most things. I had a young man who was very active in the Republican Party approached me at a table I was doing in a county in eastern Montana. And he says, I don't understand it. Why aren't you a Republican? And I said, well, because they spend exactly like the Democrats. And he had nothing to say because they do. Right. And a lot of the feuds are over where the money's going. The complaint isn't that we're taking this money. It's that it should go over here.
Right.
So it's a very different mentality.
Right. And
so we're the extremists. We're the shocking people that are like, should you really be forced to pay for your neighbor's kid's school? I don't know. You don't have kids yourself. So, we're the extremists in the room that are like, I just don't know if that's morally right to do that at all. So that's what they think.
Well, when you break it down for the core of the principles, it is still the individual and your right to life and prosperity.
Yes.
And anything else is your option.
Yep.
Which in a healthy community, there's plenty of generosity and plenty of opportunity to support your neighbors and to help out where is needed. But it still should be voluntary.
There is the belief that you cannot legislate morality.
Yeah.
The war on drugs, the idea was to stop people from using drugs. That hasn't worked. And the reason it hasn't worked is because it's not a law issue. It's a heart issue.
Right.
We have people in this country who don't have purpose. They have a hole in their heart. They have pain. Or they don't have responsibility. And that's why we have a drug issue, not because drugs were legal. So those issues, and that's a harder issue to address. It's easier to say, well, let's make it illegal. The problem with making them illegal is you're making it so now all the drug dealers are dealing this stuff because addicts will get their drugs. And so you have people that are addicts who aren't going to survive their addiction because they're going to OD or they're going to get a bad batch and all this stuff. Ron Paul once said, well, if heroin was legalized, would you all go do it? No. And that's the issue, is it's not about, are we really free if you can be told, well, we think this is bad for you, so you can't do this? Because part of freedom is being able to be really dumb and face your own consequences. You know, if you decide you want to spend your life using drugs, I pray for you. I would try to stop you if you were my family member. I would do all those things. But does the government have the right to throw you in a cage for it? I don't know. I think you can't just say, I want the society to be this way, so I'm going to write these laws. I think the issues with our society aren't because of the laws, besides the suppression of maybe entrepreneurship that is happening and that we don't have a free market anymore. I think the morality crisis we're having, government just makes it worse. I think that needs to be addressed in our communities and in our families. One thing about having a prosperous country is maybe the parents don't have to work so hard, so they can spend more time raising their kids, so the system doesn't have to raise all their kids, you know.
Right, which increases all the good things. It increases the security of your family.
Yeah.
You have time to pour into your kids and talk about who you are and your identity. And I don't just mean in gender.
Yeah.
Right. I don't just mean that, but really, who are you and why were you created? And let's raise you up well to understand those core values that we believe in.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's more important to have the kids with their families than making sure they're in a system so the unions are getting their accolades. The kids aren't there for the institution. The institution was supposed to be there for the kids. And that is what happens when government starts funding something. Then it becomes such a monstrosity where it's, well, this is so important and paramount. We can't ever let this lose a dime.
Right.
You know, and just the outrage over, well, I don't even know if there was real outrage, but the faux outrage over some of these foreign aid programs, it was like, look at what good have they done?
Right.
They haven't. And I just don't really feel like going to bat for something that has such terrible results. Like, why does the free market, why does having a whole system of private education have to present perfect results when the public school system is producing subpar, if not terrible results?
I can't even get started on our public school system right now. The fact that it is doing so terrible, and you have people who are singing their praises as being effective. And I'm not talking about their effort. I'm not talking about the quality of the teachers. I'm talking about as a whole, our public school system is a massive failure.
It is.
When you have kids coming out of there where only a third of our kids are even passing grade level, but let's just go ahead and pass you on to the next grade and not talk about it. We're succeeding.
And
Big changes need to happen.
I think people think when I say this, I'm criticizing public school teachers. I actually think the system does them a disservice.
I agree.
You go to school, you learn how to do this, and then you have one employer option, unless you want to move all over. That's not fair to them. They should have the option to be like, oh, I like this neighborhood. This has a little pod of 20 students. That's privately funded. I'll just, I'll teach this little, I'll go where I glow. And they can't do that. They have to be like part of the union. They work for one boss. They have no options. And that's not fair to them. And so people think the homeschool movement, they're just anti-public school teachers, but they're not. The public school is screwing over the teachers too. It's not fair to them. I think the unions like it. And the administration, we've got massive administration staffs in schools. And I don't know if they would be necessary as much. Maybe they could, I don't know, start their own education program if it were privately funded. But, you know, I think we have to sometimes touch these sacred cows and be like, is it morally right that these people who ranch have to pay for a school their kids don't go to so you can have a gymnasium? You know, as a homeschooler for years, I mean, we can do public sports now, but for years we paid for our own sports. If your kid wants to play sports, you took on the responsibility of having a child. Maybe you should pay for it or get a sponsor. Businesses will sponsor kids. There's just so many ways to do it that does not require IRS SWAT teams going into places, because people don't realize they will throw you in jail for not paying your taxes. I met somebody who served 4 years in jail because he was a business owner who didn't do his taxes right, and they sent a SWAT team for him. So you're being robbed. That's not voluntary.
Right.
But yeah, so long way around it. Libertarians are very anti all that stuff.
Well, and I like how you mentioned before that if you can't agree as a party, that's just not in the platform.
Yeah.
I think to me, that sounds a little bit more reasonable than we have different factions that obviously don't agree. It gets so really confusing to people. What am I actually voting for? What's my representation? How do I know that you're representing that when we have these different pieces that obviously aren't agreeing and operating under the same platform?
You know, and I lived in a state that was straight red for a while. I spent 3 years in Texas. That is, you know, that is America Central, right? So when I moved down there, I was like, this is going to be Freedom Fest every day. And I realized that compared to Montana, like up north, we might as well have been running naked and wild, because their laws, there wasn't freedom, but they were red. And then when I went to vote down there, you could go through your ballot, or they had an option on the screen. You can click red or blue, and you don't even have to look at the ballot.
Really?
So you hit your button, because this is what they did, because it takes a lot of time to go through the ballot and vote individually. Red, you leave. They don't even know their candidates. Just straight red, straight blue. And
wow.
I just thought that was so unhealthy. I mean, even in this state, if you vote for a party, you follow how that person is voting, because sometimes even the best meaning guy can run that you love in your county, and he gets in there and it's intense. It is a different world. And those lobbyists are on you every single day. They'll find you when you're out of the Capitol. Hey, come to dinner with us. Hey, let's go out for drinks. You're my friend. You're my buddy. And the pressure, you promised you would vote this way. You know, you can't vote against this, you know, or Gianforte, he really wants you to get with the team on this one. And you just get in there and you're like, oh my gosh, what I thought I was going to vote for, is this really right? And then they'll say, you know, don't read that. I know you're looking at hundreds of bills, but this one's good. You can just trust me. And so it's just so much thrown at them. And sometimes I feel like the guys that are there for a second time are like, okay, no, now I know. Now I know.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think you get the rug pulled out from you. You could have the best intentions, but the power of the machine up there, the amount of money, you know, there's going to be decisions you make and you'll be like, I thought this was a good decision, and man, that was a bad bill. And they get you.
Well, and how it starts isn't usually how it ends up.
No.
The level of amendments and getting it through appropriations, if that's on there.
And I just don't trust them when they're like, it's okay because we're going to add something later on. It's like, I feel like you might not. Why can't we add it now?
Well, and it's still the power of the vote at the end of the day. And what might start out amazing turns out to be terrible. You might end up voting against the bill that you put forth.
That has happened. I really have a lot of respect for people who will vote against their own bill if it changes, because I would. I respect that.
And some do. But what I've noticed is it's just impossible to follow every bill. And so we rely on so much word of mouth. And so especially if somebody puts forth a good bill and it's promoted, okay, this is a good bill, we want this, and then you vote against it or other changes are made, people just get slaughtered politically later by fellow legislators even. And it's like, that's so unfair because you changed everything about this.
I remember when I was radicalized during COVID into politics and really getting in it. I had a little YouTube channel and I was on there ranting and raving because I was stuck inside my house. And I was doing rallies, doing all the things, and I had a group that I had worked with, and they wrote me and they said, we really want you to promote this bill. It's a good one. It's a good one. And I naively was like, oh, yeah, these guys are for freedom. This is going to be a good one. So I put up, I shared it. I was like, oh, looks like a good bill. I went out to dinner that night with some of my maskless warrior friends. And one of the ladies looked at me. She's like, I cannot believe you're supporting that. And I'm like, why? She's like, go to page 6. And I looked at it, and it was something in the clause that said, if the business doesn't adhere to the county health board's decrees, they have to pay a fine of $2,000 per day. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like, and ever since then, anytime someone's like, oh, this is a great bill, I'm like, I will read it. And if it's 40 pages long, then it's just a no, because I'm not going to sit and read it. That's too much time. But yeah, and so you get a little sideswiped, and then you learn real fast. You're like, oh, you are a lobbying group, and this is what they've told you to lobby for. So, you're for sale.
There's a lot of movable pieces there.
Yeah, and I'm grateful to the girl who cornered me on that, because I'm like, thank you.
Well, and how great that you can have people in your group that aren't scared to push back.
Yeah.
And say, hey, I'm going to challenge you on this, right?
Yeah, I run the Facebook group Montana Women for Freedom. And it's got quite a few members, but I think only 12 see the posts, which is fine. But I put up something every day, at least, just like a Mod Podge of screenshots of what happened the day before, just for fun. And people can go there and they're like, oh, these memes are hilarious, because they always are.
Right.
But I like it when they push back and they say, well, actually, I disagree. And then they debate a little bit, and I think that's healthy.
I think so. I mean, that's the whole iron sharpens iron premise, right?
Yeah. And I even have, I've got Democrats on this page. And now if they write something super long, I know, I'm sorry, if I triggered you and it's 40 pages long, it's not getting read. I'll just let the abyss have it. But, and I've had Republicans do that too, but I appreciate the feedback. So I will put up some snarky things about the hypocrisy of the whole Pride movement thing, and sometimes I'll get pushback, and I'm like, that's okay. I'm glad you're here and that you're sharing your idea, and I love how we can come together on certain issues, I really appreciate that. I don't like it when people say, I can't believe that this senator worked with AOC on this peace deal. I'm like, I will work with anybody to get something better for the people of this country, so they have more liberty and we have less war. And
right.
I will stand with you. I'm not going to stand with you on probably anything else, but we can work on this. And that's the power of coalitions. One thing we've really worked on is we're trying to get Defend the Guard passed in Montana.
Right.
Everybody is.
Which just makes sense.
Yeah, well, not to some people. You say that. It would be beautiful if this country could do something about our foreign policy. It's bleeding us dry. We have so many broken men. Some of the things they've seen. This is not warfare for a noble cause, like we like to think that we've done in the past. You know, my great-grandfather was in World War I in the trenches, which was a terrible, pointless war. And I always respected that he did that. But what we're getting now is these veterans, the military takes them when they're young. They destroy their bodies, some of them their minds. You know, your knees are busted when you're out. All this stuff happens, and then you're cast out. And for what? Like, what? Afghanistan doesn't even have an air force, and 99% of the country had never heard of 9/11. We could have gotten Osama bin Laden without having to build an empire in Afghanistan. What did we do? You know, so it's heartbreaking. That's my generation, you know, and it's very heartbreaking when we go in to promote Defend the Guard, and every single person besides the lobbyists who are against us are these elderly gentlemen from Vietnam years, from all that stuff. And it's like, yeah, but nobody under the age of 40 is standing on your side, and none of you are going to war. And all these young guys are standing up with these testimonies, you know, and we had some older guys on our side who were talking about how their grandson's life is ruined for nothing. Like, what are we doing?
Well, it's not a game.
No, it's not a game.
These are people's lives.
Yeah.
This is a very serious business, and I don't think
They're our sons. You know,
Yeah.
this is America's sons.
this should not be played
No.
like anybody is a dispendable piece. This
No.
isn't a game. This is serious.
No, and it's such a tragedy. The millions that have died over there too, we're creating a lot of enemies. You know, somebody comes in and, you know, Afghanistan is tribal. It's a bunch of tribes, you know, so it's like, but we say, oh, it's this country. They're very rural. This is where empires go to die. So what's happened over there, I think we're radicalizing people, and we have been for decades. And I think that makes us more unsafe. I want this country to be safe. I'm not reckless. I'm not like holding up a lighter and singing Kumbaya that, you know, if we're just nice to everyone, they'll be nice to us. I know the world
Right.
doesn't work like that, but I'm like, you know, but bombing people shouldn't really be the first go-to.
Right.
You know, and it's definitely nothing to cheer,
Yeah.
even when we have to. So,
Well, Dru, I'm just so grateful that you came in today, and
well, thank you for having me.
it was great to hear your perspective, and to give us a little bit better idea about the different parties, and be able to talk about, the similarities and where their thought processes are. And
I will close on this one thought. George Washington, in his farewell address, he said that the worst thing that could happen to this country would be to only have two parties. He said it will destroy the whole country. You will end up voting for what he called straw men. They're just not even alive and propped up because that's your guy.
mm-hmm,
I think you can have a healthy government with multiple political parties.
mm-hmm.
So I know it's a little radical, but we can get out of our comfort zone and embrace this idea.
I think it's great, and I think different perspectives are a benefit.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So
Thank you.
great conversation. Thanks, Dru.
Thank you.